All right, hi everyone. I'm Dan Albers with Chad Cunningham here, and also Tony Henson joining us here on Skype. And really, the purpose of this Facebook Live discussion is of the Redskin name. Other board issues are important, like the money spent, buses, etc. That we'll focus on. We're only going to focus on the Redskin name and the logo, and look at the facts behind the name, and also to debunk many of the things that the other side claims to be facts that simply aren't true. The decision will be made to make the recommendation to the school board, and ultimately our school board will make a decision on June 25th about the future of the Redskin name. And so that's kind of what we're going to be here discussing tonight, and kind of be an open forum between Chad, myself, and Tony. And again, if you got any questions, you can drop us some questions. We don't necessarily know if we're going to get to them or not. We're going to try. We got John Raymond here helping us out, class of 1976 back there, and he's going to help us out and give us some questions. So we're going to go ahead and go on here with the show.
Well, once again, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us on your Sunday night here tonight, and special thanks to Dan for helping me put this together, and special thanks to Tony as well. We're going to get right started here, but as Dan mentioned just a moment ago, you know, we all know that we're facing basically two dates that are coming up. This coming Tuesday is the final committee meeting where the branding committee, will make a recommendation to our school board for a decision that we believe will be made on the June 25th school board meeting. And I think it's important to note that one of the key things that we've come across, taken directly from the website for the Ohio School Board of Ethics, and I'm going to read a quote about the way the school board should conduct business. Render all decisions based on the available facts and my independent judgment, other than succumbing to the influence of individuals or special interest groups. So let that sink in just for a moment here. And behind us here, we've already kind of introduced him, but a good friend of ours, Mr. Tony Henson, representative of NAGA, the North American Guardians Association. I'd like to welcome briefly Mr. Tony Henson. How are you, Tony?
Great. How are you guys?
Very, very good. Thanks for being here with us. We're going to get into some questions.
Native American Guardians Association, not North American.
I'm sorry. I apologize. That's my first screw up already. Native American Guardians Association. I'm glad we got the official representative here. I apologize. I apologize. Eunice, don't hurt me if you're watching. You know, let me give you a brief history real quick before we get right into the questions here. Brief background of the Anderson Redskins name. Those of us that are passionate about this, many of us realize that the Anderson High School logo became the Anderson Redskins back in the 1936-1937 school year. And this name was only ever meant to show pride, honor, strength, and, you know, a warrior-like tradition. This issue of people wanting this name to change has come up now 3 different times. It came up in 1998, 2003, and now here in 2018. The previous 2 times, the school board has voted to keep the name and move on from this, but this is something that has come up again now 15 years later here in 2018. Another point before we get into the questions, there are 10 other high schools in the state of Ohio that use the word Redskin as their logo. And we find it quite interesting that those high schools were each contacted individually, and none of them are being faced with this issue of this name being insensitive or a racial slur. So let's get right into the questions, and we'll turn our attention to our guest here, Tony Henson. And Tony, basically give us some history, some facts behind the origin of the term Redskin. Where did it come from?
I guess somewhat multifaceted. If you take a look at the historical perspective, Indians did paint their bodies red ceremonially, especially before going to war. Then you have more of a real-world example where Indians call themselves, you know, skins, Redskins. You have Sitting Bull, French Crow, and Tecumseh. They are documented as having referred to themselves as red men or Redskins, and a lot of, you know, Indian people call themselves skins. You know, just because of the color of their skin, just like some, you know, people refer that are white, black or black. So, but I think the most striking, you know, if you really wanted to pin it down, I've got a paragraph here I'm going to read, and it says, more than a decade ago, in the authoritative linguistic survey, I Am a Redskin, the adoption of a Native American expression, Ives Goddard, the senior linguist and curator at the Smithsonian Institution, concluded that the word Redskins was created by Native Americans and that it was first used as an inclusive expression of solidarity by multi-tribal delegations who traveled to Washington, D.C. to negotiate national policy towards Native Americans. The actual origin of the word Redskin is entirely benign, Goddard is quoted as saying. So I think that's kind of the definitive.
Very good. And before Dan asks the next question, I want to make sure that folks here know, a lot of us that are in this group do recognize Tony. But Tony, tell us a little bit about your background. You are Native American blood.
Yeah, my grandpa on my dad's side was near full-blooded Cherokee, and then married into on my mom's side was a full-blood Cherokee. So I'm a quarter Cherokee, and it's always something that I've grown up with and identified with. Even though I'm 75% something else, I'm a quarter Cherokee, and that's what I identify as. Very good.
Yeah, Tony, one of the big questions I think that we hear a lot of is that, the thing that they've brought up at all these meetings all the times, the other side, was that the dictionaries defined the Redskin as a racial slur. Just explain a little bit about that. A lot of people said, it's in the Oxford Dictionary, it's in this dictionary, and it's a racial slur. Kind of go into a little bit about that, because I think that has always been one of the points that they've brought up at every single meeting that we've been involved in.
Well, I think some of the earliest dictionary definitions, you will find that Redskin is a term, and it's pretty simple. It's a North American Indian, is pretty much how it's generally described. But I know Andre, who's on our board, has done some research recently, and he talked to somebody at one of these dictionary outfits, and he asked him, why is it more in recent times that it's showing up as a racial slur, and the guy said that it all is about what is trending in popular culture. So you have this movement, and they're saying it's a racial slur, blah, blah, blah. That plays into it, and it shouldn't. It should just, the truth should guide it, but it's being played in by, some of the trending things in our society. So.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that that's how this all has come about, and that's why we're here tonight. Is just a lot of the times I know board members and other, they're saying that they're not watching this, and this is kind of a thing to present the facts to them. And this is one of the facts, I believe, that I don't know a lot of people are really familiar with that. What you just brought up and what Andre's brought up to you, and I think that's a very important point to bring up. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think it's a huge. It could stop it right there, I think.
Yeah, should. For every dictionary slur that they could come up with, you can come up with 10 others, and point out where it's been what it's always been, a Native American term for Native American.
We got this. The other thing that we've talked about, or that we want to bring up too, also is the site, the 3 polls that they conducted, and one was ESPN, Sports Illustrated, and the Washington Post about the Redskin name and whether the name is offensive or not. Talk a little bit about those polls that they've had.
Well, I think the ESPN one goes back. Maybe it was one of the earliest ones, but I think it showed like 71% of Native Americans favor, not just don't have a problem with, favor the Redskins name. And ESPN, I believe that was the earliest one. ESPN back in 2002 showed that I think it was 81 or 83% of Native Americans have no problem with the use of names and imagery more broadly than Redskins in sports and mainstream. And then the big one, the knockout blow, was in 2004 you had an Annenberg survey that showed 90% of Native Americans have no problem support the Redskins name, and then here you are, 14 years later, have times changed? Well, they have a little bit, because the 2016 Washington Post poll showed 91%, so it actually jumped up a percent of support for the Redskins name. So it's overwhelming, and that's the disconnect between the people, the tribal membership and average rank and file Native Americans who do not involve themselves in this political radical movement. The only people that involve themselves in this political radical movement are radical activists, and they are able to put pressure, and a lot of it financial, a lot of it political, upon tribal leaders who sign this thing saying, yeah, Native American mascots are bad. Well, I think, NAGA stands against mascots. But, can we have Native American imagery that is respectful, names that are respectful? Absolutely. And a lot of these organizations, every tribe uses Native American imagery. All of these, activist organizations use Native American imagery. Why is theirs okay, and you can't put it on your T-shirt and it be okay? It's preposterous. It's laughable.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to bring up too is every time that we see something or we bring up anything about these polls, they always say it's outdated. They always say that it's not accurate information, and it's kind of frustrating that when we present facts, they try to say it's outdated or not. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? It always seems that everything that we bring as far as polls or whatever, they're always bringing up that it's outdated.
Well, 2016 is pretty recent.
Thank you.
And all of these, Annenberg is a non-political, right down the middle organization. And then you have ESPN, Sports Illustrated, and Washington Post, who have admitted they support the Not Your Mascot movement, but even they couldn't, sway the people being surveyed. It is what it is. And the questions that they asked, the sample base, everything was the way that it should be. And the other side just doesn't like the results.
Exactly. Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we've heard people from the other side say, oh, those polls are flawed. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. Come on. The Washington Post is by far one of the most liberal media publications, leaning left publications in this entire country. We can probably all agree that if those results came up different, they would have posted them differently. As you said, they support the Not Your Mascot movement.
They're rooting for different results. They want it to go 90% the other way, but that's not the way it is. And the best poll of all is if anyone ever has an opportunity to go to an Indian reservation, just walk around and see how many people are wearing the jerseys,
Absolutely.
The caps, the Washington Redskins, the Cleveland Indians, the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, it's everywhere, and Native Americans love the imagery and the names. It's just the way it is. In fact, I got started in all of this because I live near the University of Illinois, where we had the Chief Illinois controversy, and back in April, I was invited to come to a critical conversation on the Chief, hosted by the Chancellor. And so we broke up into groups and so forth and had discussions about Native American imagery and so forth. And at my table, I had a professor from an American Indian Study program at the U of I, and the other people in my group were pretty far left, and they were talking about, oh, Native Americans hate the imagery and so forth. And he had to break in and say, look, I tell you, I'm an enrolled tribal member at the Hopi tribe in Arizona, and I have all the time people asking me for T-shirts and sweatshirts, caps, the Chief Illinois, the hated symbol by the left at the University of Illinois. And I mean, right there, it's just, it is that dichotomy between, these radical activists and the people.
And I'm sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to interrupt, but, just to kind of wrap up this topic here, if Dan wants to say something, that's fine as well. But you touched on it just a moment ago, but in our local Cincinnati Enquirer today, we had a person on the other side, a changer, write about some of the organizations that have written to Anderson and the school board this year asking the name be dropped. And you had touched on it a moment ago. Just to expound on that a little bit, I think one was the National College of American Indian, is that right? The NCAI, is that right?
Of the American Indian.
Yeah. So you had touched on it a moment ago, but you mentioned the rank and file Native Americans don't have a problem with this, but maybe expound a little bit, because to the person reading this article, they might think, oh my gosh, if Anderson High School has been asked to drop this name by these major representations, what they think are of Native Americans, why aren't we just putting this to bed and getting rid of the name?
Because they don't represent their tribal members.
Okay, that's.
They just represent, like I said, this is a political movement. The rank and file Native American member or non-members who are just out there in the world aren't a part of this. They just go about their day-to-day lives. And the thing about it is that this movement at its core, and these people have told us who they are. They are radical American. They hate America. and they have a radical plan of decolonization, as preposterous as that sounds, but they want to take away things. They want to hurt, just like Anderson. You represent the white man. Most of the people in your community, your students, alumni, are not Native American. So they want to take this away from you. They want to exact vengeance. Ultimately they want to take back control of the government, and I guess 300 million people move to an island or something. It's just ridiculous. And there's this website called Unsettling America, where they put their goals on there, and they talk about their hatred for capitalism. So this is a Marxist, radical. I'm not even going to say liberal, because there are many people that are liberal that support the names and images. A lot of Native Americans consider themselves politically liberal. It's not a conservative liberal issue.
Good point.
It's a far, just like you have a far right, like the Ku Klux Klan, that although I'm conservative, I would never support anything like that. You have a left, but you have a far left that has radicalism, and that's what this is. Very far leftist hate agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just put that to rest. Like I said in the meeting that I spoke at one time, you put it to a vote and you put it to rest, and this thing is done and over with in our community. It's plain and simple. You got all these people out there. Every place I go, every community I go, I work over in Westchester, everybody says how ridiculous this is. Everybody. So as I said before, you put it to a vote in Anderson Township, this is over with and done, and that's what it needs to be. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll let you go on, Chad.
We could keep going on that, but let's get back to some of the questions that we hear from the other side, or some of the what I call fallacies that the other side talks about. And Tony, the next one talking about they call our logo a caricature. And you've already mentioned it already, but the Native American Guardians Association is really big on that, and you have told me and told us about, hey, we are very, very interested in how things look. And tell us a little bit about our logo. Is it a caricature?
No. Actually, I've seen a lot of Native American logos for teams. And honestly, when I saw it, I'm like, wow, that's one of the best ones, the most respectful that I've ever seen. Sometimes you do see it, some that are like cartoonish and, clearly out of bounds to a certain degree. So as far as NAGA, we encourage those schools to, take on something that has a, higher level of dignity and even a regional appropriateness. Your logo is regionally appropriate because the Indians of your region were Woodslands Indians, so they didn't wear the headdresses. They wore the feather, on the back of the head and so forth. So it's very respectful. Now, you contrast that to the, let's call it the mascot of NCAI, which is an Indian wearing a headdress. And I would say that it's cartoonish. So I'm calling on NCAI to get rid of their mascot immediately, because it is stereotypical and theirs needs to be changed. Your guys' is fine, but theirs is...
There we go.
And I'm offended by it.
I am offended too.
I'm
there
offended
we go.
by it, so we got to change it then.
but by their logic, if they were to take their own logo and put it on a sports jersey, then theirs becomes racist. Okay.
Right. You hit the nail on the head.
One of the other...
This whole movement is ludicrous, so...
Oh, it is.
I mean, this is fodder for Saturday Night Live.
we got a future.
Any level of seriousness is preposterous. The whole thing is made up.
Agreed. One of the other things that they said is using the Redskin is harmful to self-esteem to Native American children. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, where they get that is back in the early 2000s, psychologist Stephanie Freiberg did these supposedly unbiased studies. And what she did, she took some students from a single reservation in Arizona, and basically she set up this premise with a leading question saying that most Native Americans gain their identity from what they see in newspapers and on television and so forth. Number one, who says that that's true, And so what she was doing is leading the students to a predefined conclusion. And then when they used the imagery, she only used the most extreme. She used Chief Wahoo and Pocahontas from Disney. She didn't show like the Anderson, Redskin, or the Fighting Sioux, or the Fighting Illini symbol. Just the most extreme. So basically what happened is this highly biased study became like the cornerstone of the movement. Well then, and it was adopted by a president of the APA who was not a psychologist. Well, then you had a series of follow-up study by an actual psychologist from Stanford, Dr. Phil Zimbardo, who was a later president of the American Psychological Association, and he tore this study apart for its bias, for its generalizing. Here you have just a small group from Arizona, and they're generalizing that over an entire 500 and some tribes nationally. And also the construct of the, how they were being led, they were being primed, and that has received several published criticisms. And so what Zimbardo's studies revealed was that the Not Your Mascot movement, it is actually harmful to the esteem of children, because Zimbardo concluded that the people that take on this mindset fall into a past negative mindset, which is very damaging. And one of his conclusions was those who choose to take on the past negative mindset, taking something that has always been good and then turning the past into something negative, creates a very high likelihood that these people will act out of revenge and out of seeking a vendetta. And that's exactly what you see playing out. But he said that those who have a past positive, who are able to take something from the past and have a positive interpretation or how it can be made better and so forth, that is the path for reconciliation. The other people make it very difficult to come to any kind of compromise solution. They don't want compromise solution. They want to do what Zimbardo said and play out a vendetta-based agenda. It's very damaging. It is proven by a APA psychologist that their movement, the Not Your Mascot movement, is harmful, and especially harmful to children.
And tagging on to that, Tony, one of the things that I find just almost laughable, like you said, is that basically they're so hypocritical about what they're talking about. They're hiding behind these fake Twitter names, hiding behind these nobody knows who they are, and they're throwing things at people in our group and people that want to protect this name. And you're basically, what you're saying is just proving that point, that these Not Your Mascot people and people that are for change actually is more harmful and damaging.
It is more harmful. It's you're teaching children to be victims, to hate America, to be negative and be miserable malcontents and infect others around you with your misery. I will tell you that the overwhelming majority of Americans, but include in that Native Americans, do not hold this past negative view. Most Native Americans, I'm going to say the overwhelming majority of Native Americans, are well assimilated, patriotic people who love this country, and they would never dream of coming into a peaceful, wonderful community like Anderson and start calling your people racist and calling for you to injure traditions and so forth. That is not how normal, everyday Native American people are. This is a radical hate movement. Mm-hmm. They are unrepresentative of Native Americans, and that's why we're fighting back.
Yeah. And they talk about using the term Redskins puts our community in a bad light, in a harmful light. And what you just said, makes me wonder. We've got there's a high school in Mesa, Arizona, that is the Redskins. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. That's on an Indian reservation, a Native American reservation. And even yourself, you use the word that they call us racists. And Tony, it offends me that they're calling you a racist. You have Native American blood. How do you react to that? I mean, I personally am not. You can call me a racist. It doesn't make me a racist. I know I'm not a racist. I know Dan is not a racist, and I don't know anybody in our group that wants to protect this pride and this Redskin name that is a racist. I would call them out if they were. First of all, we're not going to use a word that we believe is racist. It wouldn't make any sense. But it is even more laughable to me that you are part Native American. Eunice Davidson is full-blooded Native American. She doesn't find this offensive. She thinks it's about pride and honor. And these people on the other side are calling you and people like Eunice racist for wanting this name to remain. What do you say to that?
Well, they're not just calling her and I, they're calling 91% of the Native American
there you go.
community racist.
Thank you.
Like I said, these people are not grounded in any basis in fact. Calling someone a racist, that's a matter of opinion. And they choose to want to divide people along racial lines. I mean, that is what this whole movement is. Remember, it's an anti-capitalist Marxist movement, and at the heart of that is you have to tear down the structures that are currently in place. And they know that they can't take over the government and decolonize, so they're going to take away whatever they can take. And if they can take away your Indian tradition, they will gladly do it. Theirs is not to provide any type of compromise or education or so forth. Theirs is to come and destroy. And the fact that anyone in Anderson School Board would listen to them for 10 seconds is beyond me, if they would just take the time to educate themselves. Look at their website, Unsettling America. These people are telling you who they are and what they're about. So I challenge the board, go on to Unsettling America. They tell their points of how they want to decolonize America and how they want to destroy every tradition and things that most Americans, and in fact most Native Americans, hold precious. Most Americans, most Native Americans love this country and are proud Americans, and Native Americans are the highest percentage ethnic group that serves in the military. So it's really sad that this movement, you talk about the stereotyping, they are stereotyping Native Americans as a group of crybaby or malcontent whiners who are so psychologically fragile that they just see a name and an imagery on a sports jersey and they want to commit suicide or go into the insane asylum. What a humiliating stereotype these people are sending out there. And probably there's people in your community that have a bad image of Native Americans by the way that these people are acting.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about that. I think people are misinformed. They don't understand and that's exactly why we're doing this right now, is to let everybody out there understand what's going on, and hopefully they'll see this and understand that these facts, they have to look at the facts. I mean, that's basically what this boils down to. And real quick on the community thing, if it looks bad on the light of the community, I'm telling you, if the name is changed, it will destroy the community. I'm telling you, it'll absolutely destroy the community. And I don't know how else to tell that to people and show that to people, just hearing some of the stuff that we've heard from other people and doing our information and looking into all this stuff. That Chad and I and all these groups, all these people here, everybody that's doing this, we're doing it because we're finding the facts. We are finding out what's going on, and all they have to do, that's all they have to do. If I was in class, if I had to take something and I put something wrong on my test or did something, I'm failing if I don't have the facts. That's what we're trying to tell you to do, is find the facts and go with it. I'm going to get on a rampage, so I got to stop. So I'll go to we got the next.
But hey, just to wrap up, Dan, with what you said, and find it interesting. We're talking about, you're a graduate of Anderson, I'm a graduate of Anderson, John over here helping us out is a graduate of Anderson. You don't have to be a graduate of Anderson to obviously want this name to stay, but we talked about this earlier. Yeah. You find the people that are passionate about saving this name and keeping the Redskin tradition alive are the people that are vested in the school. They either have children, they volunteer in the community, they're vested in the community, vested in the school, the pride and tradition that happens. I can't say the same for many of the people on the other side. Are they vested? Are they vested in our school? Are they vested in our community? Do they really care about the schools?
And I'm going to answer that real quick, Tony, is we proved it. I proved it in the meeting we had with Mr. Homer Shadowheart that came and showed up. And he said how offended he was. I remember him going up to the board and looking and said, empower. That is a wrong word to have up there. Well, then he goes up there and we find him with a Chicago Blackhawks jersey on. How many other people are like that? There's probably more that we can name, and a lot of these people are not from our community. You might only have a select few from this community. We see out-of-town license plates I mean, so it's just, we'll get on a roll here. I mean, it just.
That Donna Finn,
Boyle.
Donna Finn, whatever her last name is.
Boyle.
Boyle, something like that. She's been really heavy on Twitter against you guys, and she's been attacking NAGA and different people. But the goods on her is that in Pennsylvania, in her school district, she basically had her son say that he was being bullied or something of that effect because of the name. I think it was Redskins. And then they caught him wearing a Redskins jersey. And so the school decided to do an investigation, and they totally found that, it was a total sham, and they shut it down. And so Donna Fan had to pack up her bags and head to Anderson. It's a sham movement. It's based upon lies, and they'll stoop to no low. They don't have any standards. They'll lie. They'll call you racist. They'll do whatever. It's just really horrible people behind this. Well, and I don't understand why anyone on your board would even consider. I mean, how much information do you have to have from the Native American community, and from the alumni and the students and the community itself? It's overwhelmingly favorable. So you would think.
I mean, you would honestly think, and I guess we'll find out in a couple of days here. But one of the other question is, why now? You've got for years and years, the Redskins name was accepted in the Washington Redskins logo, created by a Native American and former president of the NCAI, and is now suddenly racist and offensive. Why all of a sudden? Is it just because they like you said, I guess earlier, they moved on to something else, and they're going to attack the smaller community, or the community of Anderson?
Well, I mean, this whole movement dates back to the 1960s, really, the American Indian movement, where you had 3 former inmates. They got out of jail in Stillwater prison, and they became the founding members of the American Indian movement. And they would go onto reservations and cause all kinds of havoc, and this continued on to the 1980s, where tribal leaders and members didn't want them to show up. So their reputation was so tarnished that in 1991 they had to morph into the National Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media. And they had a lot of the same players at the helm. And really what's at the heart of it is, very far leftist radicalism, of vengeance, just like Dr. Phil Zimbardo said. It's a vendetta-based mindset. They want to inflict pain. They hate America. They hate our values. They want to take away not only the Native American names and imagery in sports and media, but they've even said publicly that they want to take away city names that are Native American. In North Dakota, they had a highway sign that had a Indian on it. They took that off of that sign recently, and they stopped teaching Native American education in South Dakota. And you would say, well, why would Indian people want this? It's because they want to educate Indian people. They want to educate society into their victimhood status and their radicalism. And it's seeping into the education system. And that's why you see it going on at colleges, and that's why you see what's happening at Anderson. It's kind of an alliance between the very radical leftist organizations. You have anti-Semitic groups that are backing NCAI, and just a lot of the Black Lives Matter, and just the most radical elements. And you ask why now? It's been building up for decades, and it's gone unchallenged until the formation of the Native American Guardians Association, where we have been able to round up those silent majority of the rank and file, who are the 91%, and now we're fighting back.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of wrapping things up here with questions to you, but Tony, if nothing else here, I can certainly say, I think the thing, and part of the NAGA mission is educate, not eradicate. And I think if I can look at one positive, regardless of the outcome of what happens here, one positive is that I've been able to learn and educate myself about Native American traditions, and especially about this community and conversations I've had with Andre, and I appreciate Andre and the facts that he's given us and helped us with to kind of learn about our community here and about why we existed here in Anderson Township and about how Native Americans were so prevalent here, and part of the tradition of naming our high school logo the Anderson Redskin based on historical fact that unfortunately it's not a lot out there about it as far as what we've been educated here. So if nothing else, I am so thankful for you and Eunice and Andre and everybody with
Absolutely.
Naga that you've allowed us to educate each other on this. And Dan, we've got a couple other things just to wrap up, more pertaining to Anderson stuff, and then we'll kind of cut Tony loose here.
Yeah, one of the things that was kind of neat to me was the Anderson Redskins, the senior class motto was once a Redskin, always a Redskin. So they always talk about the students are not there, the students aren't talking. You know what they did? They went ahead and put that, and they also did their senior breakfast, I believe, as they all wanted to wear Redskin gear. So that ought to show you that the students are behind this too as well. And so that's another thing that they've always brought up was, there's not a lot of students here, not a lot of students here. I think some of the students, they showed right there in that senior breakfast. Don't you agree, Chad?
Absolutely. And in my conversations, and I have a lot of relationships with students and recent high school graduates, and I would ask a couple of them, hey, just give me a percentage. What percentage of students at Anderson do you think support keeping the name? One of them said 97%, 95%. And that was actually a little bit higher than I thought. And they just said, we don't have problems. Even some people that they know that may not embrace the name, those people aren't shunned or looked down upon, or it's just business as usual. And the pride and tradition that the logo, the Redskin logo, carries on prevails. And that's what I truly hope and pray that's what we come to here.
Yeah, Tony, real quick we're going to try to wind this down. I know we've been on here for a while. We've taken a lot of your time. We appreciate it. But, some of the things we talk about is the repercussions of change and cost, what it's going to do for the change of a name and the community, just all that stuff.
The dollar-wise, it can run into millions. You think of all the things that have to change. Psychologically, Andre did a study where he found that the schools that come under attack from the name changers, a lot of the fallout is high anxiety, post-traumatic stress, even death threats. It rips communities apart. One of the things when you're in high school especially, you take pride in your high school and your logo and so forth, and to have that just dramatically ripped away from you, and to lose those memories and the thing that brought pride, there's no winners in it. Even the changers, they don't gain anything by doing this, and no one is hurt by the respectful names and images. Now, if you had something goofy going on, like a white person running around as an Indian and doing a tomahawk chop and stuff like, you shouldn't do that. And NAGA doesn't support mascots, but if you've got a respectful name, which the Redskins is, it's something that Dietz, the former coach of the Boston Braves, suggested to the Washington Redskins that they call themselves, and he was a Native American. And then you have Blackie Wetzel, creating the emblem. He was a former president of NCAI, and he created the logo, the Redskin logo for the Washington Redskins. There is nothing wrong, and there's everything to be proud of the Redskin name and your image, and you and your students, alumni, and the community should embrace the heritage and wear it proudly.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And I'll end my little part of it here real quick is just being involved in the Anderson High School football alumni golf outing every year. I had a couple sponsors that approached me and told me that, and this is not in our community, this is out of our community, that have sponsored me and said, if you change the name, I am not sponsoring your golf outing anymore. That's just only a few. If it happens, I think it's going to be worse. So I just wanted to bring that. I've brought it up before. It'll be devastating, I think.
And folks, just to wrap things up here again, and on behalf of all of us here in the group, educate, not eradicate, and those of us that want to keep the Anderson Redskin tradition alive, Dan Albers, Chad Cunningham, we want to leave you with one thing. Thanks to Tony, all of our friends from Naga, Eunice Davidson, and also Andre as well. I encourage everybody, get the facts, understand what's going on, and we're going to send this to our friends on the school board and the committee as well. We hope that they're watching. We hope that they see this. But again, I'm going to leave you with what we began with. This is from the Ohio School Board Code of Ethics. They took an oath. When they joined the school board here in Forest Hills, that they would render all decisions based on the available facts and my independent judgment rather than succumbing to the influence of individuals or special interest groups. For Dan Albers, I'm Chad Cunningham. Have a great night. Thank you.